Hello friends, in this video I am going to showcase how to properly hand feed Alexandrine Parrot. These two parrots are almost 5 weeks old and this is their second day for hand feeding. We will also see how to make hand feed, what should be the feeding temperature for this hand feed, and how to check baby parrot crop. First of all, I would like to show what all equipments I use for hand feeding baby parrots. I used Nutribird A19 feeding formula, electric kettle to boil water, small cup to make the hand feed, big soup cup to contain some water, digital thermometer to check feed temperature, 5 ml and 10 ml syringe, plastic plate, and some paper towel. Before beginning to feed these baby parrots, always check their crop. Currently, I'm feeding them 3 times a day, morning at 8 o'clock, in the afternoon 2 o'clock, and in the evening 8 o'clock. With the 6 hour difference in each feed, their crop should be fully empty before I start their next hand feed. These baby parrots are grown enough to digest at least 15 to 20 ml of hand feed. Let's see now how to prepare hand feeding formula for these baby parrot. I have taken 1 spoon of feeding formula and I am going to mix it with 3 spoon of hot boiling water. Each time I make fresh feed and each time I keep the ratio consistent. In this case I am using 1:3 ratio where 1 spoon of feeding formula is mixed with 3 spoon of hot boiling water. It's a good practice to measure your feed quantity so that you will get consistent feed each time. Now I am using this small electric whisker which I bought online, and it's very easy to mix hand feed with this electric whisker and you will always get a consistent feed each time. I don't like to mix any other ingredients into this hand feeding formula because this hand feeding formula is made with lot of experiment and experience, and it contains all the necessary elements that is required for your baby bird growth. When you mix hot boiling water into the hand feeding formula, what happens is this hand feeding formula also soak this boiling water nicely and you get very nice mashy hand feeding formula to feed your baby birds. Now I'm going to put this cup into cold water so that I can bring down the temperature of this hand feeding formula. You can see that the temperature of hand feeding formula is gonna be up to 50 degrees and we need to take it down up to 40 degree. Ideal feeding temperature for this hand feeding formula is between 36 to 40 degree, and I'm going to use a small trick which I will show in this video later to maintain this feeding temperature for this hand feeding formula throughout this hand feeding process. You can see that the cold water temperature is around 20-23 degrees, wherein the hand feeding formula temperature was rising more than 40-45 degree. Keep stirring and checking temperature of this hand feeding formula so that when you get your required range, you can start hand feeding to your baby parrots. Now, once you see that the temperature is around 40 degrees, what you can do is you can remove this cold water from this small soup cup and then add the hot boiling water into it. Put a small plastic plate and put that hand feeding formula on top of it so that it will retain that feeding temperature for almost half an hour. You can also share your tricks to maintain this temperature consistency in the comment section below. As the hand feed is ready, let's start feeding these baby parrots. I always prefer to use small 5 ml syringe because with this 5 ml syringe you can control the flow of hand feed, and baby parrots can also swallow these hand feed without any issues. Now you also need to keep in mind that these baby parrots are not used to of this hand feeding formula. So we are getting them used to this hand feeding formula and making sure that they take this hand feeding formula properly. So handle these baby parrots very carefully so that they don't feel scared. Otherwise, they won't open their mouth to take this hand feeding formula. You have seen that I have put that tip of the syringe into their mouth and started feeding them very slowly, 1 or 2 drops at a time. These initial few days or at least a week is very important for these baby bird to get used to of this hand feeding formula and hand feeding process. So we have to be very patient in terms of feeding them very slowly, drop by drop, and they will also respond to you very nicely if they found that this hand feeding formula is good enough for them to fill their crop. Let's have a look from different camera angle how I'm feeding these baby parrots with hand feeding formula. In all my hand feeding videos, I have always mentioned that hygiene is the key to keep your baby parrot safe. So whenever you see that the hand feeding formula is stuck to their beak or anywhere into their face, quickly wipe that out so that it won't form a solid structure on their face or on their beak. Always ensure to feed them drop by drop for initial few days. This is very important because they are not used to of this process of hand feeding and they are also doing it for the first time. So we need to be very patient to feed them drop by drop. Make sure that they are not scared at all. They should be handled with care and very nicely, gently so that they take this hand feeding formula very nicely. You can see that in a day or two, once they get used of this hand feeding formula, they will also start taking it automatically. As soon as they will see the syringe tip, they start coming towards that syringe tip and start eating that hand feeding formula on their own. If there is any small mess happens to feed them, like if the feed goes anywhere on their face, make sure that you wipe them immediately. Don't let that stick to their face. Don't let it be there. It might cause infection. It might create problems to your baby birds as well. I have another video which I made for cockatiels, how to hand feed for cockatiels or any birds for the initial first week, because that process is very important. How the consistency of the hand feed should be when you hand feed any baby bird for the first time. No matter what their age is, their hand feeding process is the same. So even if you are feeding to a cockatiel or to any other parrot, you should have that consistent process. And once you follow that consistent process, you will never have any crop related issues to your baby birds. I have also given the link here for the first day of hand feeding and how that process should be followed on each day, how the feed should be made on each day, how the consistency of those feeds should be followed on each day. I have mentioned all those small tricks in that video which I made for the cockatiels. You can follow the same video for these birds. So when I made the feed yesterday, I used the consistency 1:4 so that the hand feed which I gave yesterday was more thin, wherein I saw that at late night when they took the third hand feed, their crop was fully empty. So that's when I decided to increase the consistency. So instead of 1:4, I dropped it to 1:3. I'm going to maintain this consistency of 1:3 throughout their hand feeding process. They are right now 5 weeks old, close to 5 weeks old. So they are right now taking almost 20 ml of feed. But when I gave them the feed for the first day, I started with 15 ml. Give them less feed which is thinner in consistency for the first day and then increase the consistency once you see that they are digesting the food nicely. These baby parrots are very susceptible to any kind of infection, bacteria. So we need to ensure that the cleanliness is of a highest priority. Clean their beak, their face, their surroundings every day, every time, whenever you feel that it is not hygienic enough. Because right now they are taking 15 to 20 ml of hand feed, I need to make sure that all their wood shavings are changed every day. I try to do it every evening so that they get nice and cozy and dry bedding throughout night. Let's hand feed the second baby now. This second baby is 2 days younger than the first one. It is always advised to hand feed the oldest baby first and then hand feed the youngest one next. You might have noticed one more thing, that these babies are not crying for food. The reason for that is these babies are old. These are now at least 5 weeks old. And at this age, they know that we are not their parents. They know that we are the one who took them out of their breeding box or their nest, and we are trying to hand feed them. So that's why they are little scared, but we have to ensure that they are comfortable enough to take this hand feed, and they should feel fully safe when we are handling them. We should not be handling them carelessly. We should not be handling them in a way that they might get harmed. So, our uttermost importance towards these baby birds is that they should be comfortable enough to take this hand feed. I've set the second camera in the front and one camera on the top so that you can easily see that how I'm holding their head, and from with one hand how I'm pushing the syringe slowly and then feeding them very slowly. You can see that for last 15 seconds I was rushing a bit, and these parrots started coughing because the hand feed went into their windpipe. So we have to be very slowly feeding them so that they can easily swallow this hand feed. Some baby bird might take few days before they can get used to this hand feed, or some baby bird immediately start taking this hand feed without any issues. If your bird doesn't cry for hand feed, it doesn't mean that their crop is full. That's why use syringe to measure how much hand feed you have given. So whenever I give them hand feed, I try to touch their crop as well to feel how much feed I still need to give them. Take some small breaks while feeding these baby birds, because these small breaks give them enough time to swallow whatever left into their mouth, and then they can be ready to take another hand feed. It took me almost 30 minutes for this complete process. You might have noticed earlier that the baby parrots were there in the box when I was making the hand feed. This is a good habit because when you are in front of these baby parrots and when you make hand feed every time in front of them, then they are getting used to of that noise which is happening around them, and it's very useful to make them very comfortable, because any noise that they hear, they get scared, and then when they hear that noise consistently 3 times or 4 times a day, then they become aware that this noise is not so harmful, so nothing is happening around them, they are perfectly in a safe condition, and that makes them very relaxed to take hand feed nicely. You can already see that this second baby was struggling a bit to take this hand feed. So I am taking small breaks. I'm taking enough time to make sure that I give hand feed to this baby bird. I give them a little bit of searing on their beak, on their head, so that they get comfortable with this hand feed. Make sure that you at least give them 15 to 20 ml of hand feed, which is required for them for their optimum growth. As I said, currently I am giving them 3 times a day, so this hand feed, which makes them 6 hour time gap in between. If you are not comfortable enough to make this 3 times a day, you can still do 4 times a day, but then reduce the quantity. No matter how you do it, you have to make sure that you give them enough food for their optimum growth. Keep checking their crop, because that is very important to see if they are having this hand feed properly into their crop. If you feel that the crop is too loose, then you might want to give them another 2 3 ml or 5 ml, so that you feel their crop nicely. I have also seen that many people give these parrots some lentils, some other food, but to be honest, those things are not proper diet for these parrots. When their parents feed them, They generate crop milk, which is a good nutritious food for them. But while feeding them with some other supplements, it's not really a food for them. It's easy if we can buy some hand feeding formula like A19, and that hand feeding formula has all the required ingredients to have their optimum growth. There are instructions given on that hand feeding formula so that you can read through those instructions and follow those instructions to feed your baby birds. Once these birds get comfortable with you, that they consider you as their feeding parents, then it is very easy and a bond that you can form with these baby birds, and that last for a long time. You might have already noticed that when I was making hand feed, I was using some measured cup so that I can make this hand feed only for one feeding. So when you make this hand feed every time fresh, it also feels fresh for the baby parrots. Because of the temperature consistency that you are maintaining throughout the hand feed, they will also like this hand feed every time when you feed them. So it is important to make sure that you feed them a consistent quantity of hand feed. A consistency of that hand feed should be maintained throughout the hand feed, also throughout each feeding process. So right now, if I'm feeding them 3 times a day, I make hand feed each time fresh. Some people ask me questions that can they make one feed and use it throughout the day? My simple answer is no. Do you like to eat stale food yourself? You would like to have fresh food every serving, right? So same is the case for these baby birds. They are growing. They have certain needs for their optimal growth. And if we are not able to provide them those kind of hand feed each time fresh, then it's very difficult to obtain that optimal growth for these baby parrots. Alexandrian parrots are very difficult to breed in captivity. Their parents laid 4 eggs and they had 4 chicks as well. But the youngest chick couldn't survive. So we thought that we will make a hand feed for these 2 chicks, and one chick we left with the parent, which was the oldest one. This way, parents will also gain an experience to raise chick. Sometimes it is very difficult to make those choices, but then if you wanted to have a bond between baby bird and you, then feeding them with hand feed is the appropriate method. Second most method that I usually use for my cockatiels is I have hand tame cockatiels, and those hand tame cockatiels, whenever have chicks, their chicks also are hand tame. So that way, I don't have to feed those baby cockatiel chicks, but I still get those baby chicks as tame because their parents are tame. So similar kind of experiment can be done with other parrots as well. I have seen that the parrots which are tame, their babies are also tame. To do that, I also took some budgies, some lovebirds which are tame, and their babies are also tame. So it's very easy for me to give them appropriate nutritious food, the parents, and then parents can feed them properly. We don't have to worry about their growth. Parents are good enough to make sure that whatever their baby birds need, they can provide that kind of food to them. If you have any question regarding hand feeding or how to proceed with hand feeding, if you are facing any issue with respect to the hand feeding process, then you can put those questions into the comment section, and I'll try to respond to your question as soon as possible. I have had many people who ask me questions every day, and I try to respond them on the same day. People who are taking these baby birds for hand feeding consider this as a very big responsibility. And if you have time, then only make sure that you take these chicks for hand feeding. If you don't have enough time to feed these baby birds at the appropriate time, then I would strongly advise not to take any baby birds at home to hand feed. It's a process that takes a lot of care and expertise to make sure that your baby bird survives and grow with the optimal growth rate. I hope this Alexandrian parrot hand feeding video is useful for you to make a decision how to hand feed your Alexandrian parrot and how to make sure that they get consistent feed as well as consistent growth. If you have not subscribed to our channel, then please subscribe to support our channel and also share this video for. Thank you and see you in next video.